Le preguntaron si creía que un hombre que se autopercibe como mujer es realmente una mujer. Él sonrió al escuchar la pregunta y respondió con un simple y contundente no, y cuestionó la calidad, necesidad y el sinsentido de la pregunta. Y lo verás en este video. En él verás a Jordan Peterson siendo cuestionado por lo que te mencioné. Además, también conversará con una feminista. Mira el video completo y dime qué opinas. Pero antes, si este tipo de contenido te gusta, suscríbete a nuestro canal. Tenemos la meta a mediano plazo de llegar a los 100,000 suscriptores. Sin mayor dilación, empecemos.
That your views have been misrepresented at times.
Oh, definitely, but that's, that's part and parcel of the process. I did take a very forceful stance, let's say, against some of the excesses of the radical left-wingers, and it's in their best interest to paint me as somehow a figure of the extreme right, because then I don't have to be contended with. But, I mean, it's easy for people's views to be oversimplified in a very large public debate.
I mean, in terms of some of the issues, I mean, you say you've been painted as an extreme right-winger.
No, some people have tried that. Not very successfully, but they've tried it.
And you came to prominence in part over your opposition to this law that we just talked about in Canada, proposing the use of preferred pronouns for transgender people. Just for clarity.
Mandating them.
Yeah.
Right.
Saying that you should do it.
No,
but,
that you had to do it.
Right, you had to do it by law. But just for clarity, do you think a trans woman is a real woman?
I don't really like the way those questions are formulated. I don't know what that means. What do you mean a real woman?
Well, I'm asking you, in your mind, it depends what you think a real woman is, but do you think a trans woman is a woman?
No.
Why not?
Because I think that women are capable, generally speaking, of having babies, and they have female genitalia, and they have an XX chromosome, and I think the biological markers are relevant. It doesn't necessarily mean that I don't think that people should be treated with respect and dignity if they happen not to fit easily into a gender category. That's a different issue.
Right.
But it's a matter of definition. And I actually think it's a foolish argument in some sense. Because what do you mean by real?
Well, I mean, you've just clarified that, though. You don't think that a trans woman is a woman. And do you think that that is what is behind or explains your opposition to this idea of a law mandating you to use a preferred pronoun, is because you don't actually believe that that's the truth, that a trans woman is a woman, and therefore you can't use that pronoun?
No, that's not my argument at all.
Really?
Yeah, really. My argument is that the government shouldn't compel voluntary speech.
No, but I know what your argument is, and
no,
you've made it very
really
clearly.
But that's exactly it. There's
but the motivation
behind it.
But you don't believe
I wouldn't
put
everything on online in my life to take the stance I did unless I had thought that through very deeply. And I've thought it through very deeply. There aren't hidden motivations that have to do with some arbitrary prejudice against trans people.
Okay.
It's pure and simply this. There's never been a time in English common law history where the government compelled speech, and the Canadian government dared to do that. And that was unacceptable. And they masked it with this show of compassion for the oppressed, and I don't buy it.
Right, but you would, as I think you've said, at an individual level, if somebody asked you, somebody asked you to use a particular pronoun, you would do so.
Well, I have.
You have?
Yes.
Right, fine.
Yes.
Let's talk about feminism. Are you a feminist?
No, not as it's currently defined, certainly not.
No, well, in any other definition?
Well, I think that anybody who doesn't think that the competitive landscape should be opened up for equality of opportunity is not thinking. And so everyone's interests are better served if people have as equal access to opportunity to display their talents and to manifest their talents in the world as possible. So in that sense, certainly. But feminism now, and this is why it's so deeply unpopular, a very small minority of women in the UK identify as feminists. And the reason for that is it's primarily become an ideological weapon. And it's an ideology that I detest, actually, the ideology that it's associated with, collectivist ideology.
Right. I mean, okay, and that's your view about feminism. Aisha, are you a feminist?
Oh, absolutely. I'm a very proud feminist. And when I was a special advisor in government, I worked on women and equality issues, and I was very proud, actually, of a piece of legislation I got on the statute book with my former boss, Harriet Harman, the Equality Act. in 2010, which strengthened our anti-discrimination laws. And I fought very hard to get more women into public life, into the Labour Party. And I'm very, very proud of being a feminist, hence my pink dress.
Oh, well, all right. Obviously reverting to type then in the pink dress.
Absolutely, well.
You would like men to regain or reclaim their strength physically, mentally and morally. Is that broadly correct?
I would say morally, fundamentally, but I think the other things go along with that.
Right, and if that
But it isn't men precisely who I'm speaking to. It's people. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm actually interested in individuals, and I'm interested in their fortification against tragedy. You know, every time I do an interview, the interview is always political. It's always political.
Well, the clue is in the title of this programme. We are the Daily Politics.
No, fair enough. No, look, fair enough. And I'm not casting aspersions at this programme, but the fundamental news that's important about what I'm doing isn't the political element. And the people who talk to me don't talk politically. They say they've watched my lectures.
But part
and
of it is that I think for a lot of people the kind of personal does become the political.
Or the political becomes the personal.
Yeah, and I think in terms of the...
Yeah, but in this situation, a lot of people are wrong, because primarily what's happening is people are watching my lectures, and as a consequence, their lives are improving dramatically.
Oh, I'm sure they are. I'm sure people are have had a huge conversion after, and they're much happier once they've been.
It's not a conversion.
But what I would like to do is kind of almost... I think at the moment the discussion about feminism is very divisive, and sometimes it can sort of be like, okay, men have to lose and women have to gain. Actually, everybody has a lot to gain by greater equality. Now, whether you get the equality of outcome that you want, I think only time will tell. But certainly, equality of opportunity is very important. And actually,
we can agree on that.
And a lot of men would benefit from that. So I think a lot of men are having a lot of crises at the moment in terms of mental health, suicide issues, their own sense of identity, because I think some of the stereotypes put on men are quite limiting for them as well. I think they make men quite unhappy as well.
The devil's in the details with regards to equality, because I'm an advocate of equality of opportunity. But
and
I
outcomes.
think the idea outcomes, that's an appalling doctrine.
Why?
All right. Well,
because you have to produce an unbelievably potent bureaucracy to make the ever greater and ever finer distinctions that are necessary to enforce equality of outcome. How many group differences are you going to equalize across? Is it just gender and sex? How many genders?
No, so
gender and ethnicity? How many genders?
I think
how many ethnicities? How many races?
We'll let Aisha answer.
I think what people are trying to do with this, and certainly as somebody who has sought to sort of do this myself, I think you set yourself ambitions for what you would like to see, and then you try and remove as many of the structural barriers and obstacles. So you try and create that fair crack of the whip and that equality of opportunity to see where you get to with the outcomes.
That's
now,
fine.
We are in very early stages. It's only 100 years since women got the vote in this country. We have had a long established patriarchal society and set up for a long time in the world, in this country. So I think we have a long way to go to see where it plays out. There is no country in the world where we really do have gender equality properly yet in terms of real decision making and real
some of the
power.
Scandinavian countries maybe,
but they're still not quite there, and I think you've spoken a lot about this. There's still a way to go in Scandinavia. Things are not perfect in Scandinavia.
I haven't spoken about that specifically. I've spoken about
you spoke about the right stuff yesterday. You talked about the Scandinavia.
Well, I've spoken about the fact that, see, one of the things that's happened in the analysis of the differences between men and women is that the social constructionist claim is that the differences are socially constructed, right? Is that it's a consequence of environment that men and women differ. But what the scientific literature indicates is that as cultures become more egalitarian, like they have in Scandinavia, the differences between men and women actually increase rather than decreasing, which is a direct repost to the social constructionist view. So they just deny all that. The biggest differences in the world in interest and temperament are between Scandinavian men and women. It's exactly the opposite of what everyone predicted.
¿Y tú qué le hubieras respondido a la primera tía? Y a la que estaba orgullosa de su vestido rosa, ¿qué le hubieras respondido o preguntado? Déjamelo saber en los comentarios. Preguntarnos si algo es real implica cuestionarnos si eso que estamos considerando existe de manera tangible en el mundo que nos rodea. Por ejemplo, podríamos preguntarnos si un objeto o un fenómeno específico es real, en el sentido de que podemos tocarlo, verlo o medirlo. Es como cuando nos preguntan si un unicornio es real, porque no lo hemos visto y no hay evidencia concreta de su existencia. En el caso de ¿qué es una mujer? Creo que ya sabes que se sabe de manera objetiva y tangible el qué es una mujer. Si creemos o tú crees una cosa muy distinta, pues te comento que eso está bordeando la ideología. Ahora bien, hablemos sobre la separación entre la ideología y lo objetivo. Esto significa distinguir entre nuestras propias creencias personales, valores o perspectivas subjetivas, es decir, lo que pensamos o creemos, y los hechos objetivos basados en evidencia empírica y en la realidad que podemos observar. Un ejemplo de esto es lo que acabamos de ver en el video de Jordan Peterson, quien dice que lo que él piensa es producto de mucha consideración y análisis, lo cual implica también considerar de manera clara los hechos objetivos. Esta separación es importante porque promueve el rigor en la investigación y el conocimiento. En otras palabras, cuando hablamos de algo, queremos asegurarnos de basar nuestras conclusiones y afirmaciones en datos concretos, evidencia y métodos objetivos, en lugar de dejarnos llevar por prejuicios personales o creencias ideológicas. Otra ventaja de separar la ideología del objetivo es que facilita un diálogo más efectivo y comprensión mutua entre personas con diversas ideologías. Al enfocarnos en hechos objetivos, nuestras discusiones pueden ser más basadas en evidencia y menos propensas a conflictos basados en opiniones personales. En situaciones donde la objetividad es crucial, como por ejemplo en la toma de decisiones en políticas públicas, ciencia o medicina, debemos basarnos en hechos objetivos para tomar decisiones informadas y efectivas, que no solo beneficien a un pequeño grupo que sea cercano a dicha ideología, sino que esto sea beneficioso para todos. Reconocer la diferencia entre la ideología y la realidad objetiva también nos ayuda a minimizar la influencia de sesgos cognitivos y prejuicios que podrían distorsionar la interpretación de la información que recibimos. Finalmente, al separar la ideología del objetivo, fomentamos la diversidad de pensamiento y creamos un espacio donde diferentes perspectivas pueden coexistir. Esto es especialmente importante en sociedades pluralistas donde la convivencia pacífica y el respeto a las diferencias son fundamentales para construir comunidades más fuertes y comprensivas. ¿Y tú qué opinas? Déjamelo saber en los comentarios. Y aquí culmina este video. Si te gustó, dale like, comenta el video y compártelo. Gracias, hasta luego.